Gosh darn it, man. There's just too much information coming out about this stuff. I didn't think that we would have so much overload of commentary and opinion and articles and everything, but you know, I guess it's Vancouver media, right? It gives me stuff to talk about, so I'm very happy about that, but at the same time, it is a tad overwhelming. So today, we are heading back over to the Vancouver Canucks and talking about the latest in regards to center Elias Pettersson and all of the tea leaves for all of the potential trade ideas that have been spewed out in the media the past little while. Now, to open up the conversation, we're going to go over onto Rick Dhaliwal, because there were some posts made on Twitter citing some comments made by Dolly on yesterday's edition of the Donnie and Dolly show. This video was posted onto their Twitter account. Some are wondering if Vancouver would want a return for Pettersson like the Jack Eichel trade. And in this video clip, Dolly goes out there and says that the Columbus Blue Jackets, they are one team to keep an eye on for Vancouver when it comes to Pettersson. They have the young players and the picks to make the trade. And of course, Don Waddell tried to get him last year. Taj also says here, it's hilarious because the Sabres lost the trade and Eichel won a cup. Great template to go out there and use. Now, while I don't necessarily think that if Elias Pettersson gets traded to Columbus, they're going to win the Cup in 2026, and that Vancouver will end up being stuck in developmental hell for the next little while, I definitely do want to respond to this idea. Because when it comes to Columbus, I think a lot of Canucks fans are really freaking out about the potential return and what guys could be involved in some sort of trade, and whether or not Elias Pettersson going over to CBJ would be robbery for Waddell automatically. Does Columbus even have the assets to make that sort of a move make sense for Vancouver? And here's the thing, there are a few guys that I think would make it interesting, as in, it might actually be worth it for Vancouver to get these guys in a trade, but there are more guys on that team that wouldn't really make the trade all too worth it. We're having so many people going out there and talking about the Columbus players in Vancouver, and the first one, I'd say, the biggest one, Adam Fantilli or Kent Johnson. This was posted by JT Miller. No, not the real JT Miller, by Timothy Miller yesterday after the Donnie and Dolly segment, and you had a lot of Canucks fans bouncing back and saying, oh, Kent Johnson's not good enough, and this is not it, and this is really not going to happen, and it's not worth it. Honestly, Adam Fantilli, that's a name that I actually like a lot, and I think there would be some very interesting options for Vancouver should Fantilli be the guy coming back over from CBJ. He's a 20-year-old guy, obviously a third overall pick a few years ago, and a lot of people are super high up on Adam Fantilli, myself included. This season, Fantilli's on pace for 38 points after having 27 points in 49 games last year as a rookie. Now, he actually did produce more last season, but I do think that he was given more of a chance last season to do more work. This year, he's kind of taken a back seat in comparison to that top line of Monahan, Marchenko, Voronkov. Those guys have been lights out. Like, I think anybody that's in any sort of a fantasy league this year has been taking notice of how good Voronkov, Monahan, and Marchenko have been together. They are so good. Oh my gosh. But the problem is, Sean Monahan ended up getting injured earlier this week, and so Adam Fantilli, hey, this might be your time to shine. This might be your opportunity to go out there and finally show off that third overall talent that you had back in 2023 is worth it. Because now, he's the first-line center. Monahan's out for at least 3 weeks. So we'll see whether or not that changes the development in Fantilli's point production rates, and I say that like he hasn't had 4 points in his last 3 games already. But Adam Fantilli might be on the cusp of something big, assuming Sean Monahan stays out for a much longer time than we had expected. Now, obviously, if you look at Fantilli and you dive into the numbers, he isn't really producing as much as Elias Pettersson was when Pettersson was Fantilli's current age, so there might be a little bit of room for concern the Canucks would be getting robbed here, but that's why it wouldn't necessarily be 1-for-1, right? It'd be Fantilli plus for Elias Pettersson, who has already scored a 100-point season, who has already had all this success. Fantilli is on the cusp of having it. Also, the question is whether or not any other names would be interesting for Vancouver too. I think the second name that everybody's discussing is Kent Johnson. And I don't know if Kent Johnson is entirely the package that makes it work. Like, while in my opinion, I would be okay with Fantilli and a first and maybe another roster player for Pettersson, and that roster player probably has to be really good. At the same time, if he swapped out Fantilli for Johnson, then I don't think it's enough. I do think Johnson's ceiling is magnitudes lower than what Adam Fantilli is, even though Kent Johnson still does have a lot of talent and he can be a potential 70-point guy at the NHL level. I mean, Kent Johnson right now, under a point per game, 23 points, 27 games, although he is a little bit older, and I think as more of a winger option on Columbus, there is a little bit more of a cap compared to what he's capable of doing versus Adam Fantilli. I do think that Fantilli is just a more versatile player, a guy with a higher ceiling longer term, even though Johnson has exhibited some pretty good things at the National Hockey League level thus far. If the Canucks are able to pry away a defenseman in some sort of a move too, then hey, that'd be perfect. Imagine if it's Fantilli and a right-handed D-man heading over to Vancouver. I'm not saying a young prospect like a Denton Mateychuk, but somebody who's already on that team and who has done some pretty reasonable work already. Maybe, I don't know, Ivan Provorov or a Severson? Severson's been getting a little bit overlooked lately. Provorov is valuable, but I guess that would make it a little bit too expensive. Anyways, Columbus is certainly an option here, and for Dhaliwal to label Don Waddell as a potential guy to go after Pettersson hard, I did think it was really interesting. However, this isn't even it, because there was another article posted earlier this morning by Ryan Dixon on Sportsnet.ca talking about 4 potential landing spots for Canucks star Elias Pettersson. Now, I don't want to dive into all of these like super heavily in this video. I want to maybe save these topics for some other commentaries later on, but Dixon does talk about the Wild. He talks about the Hurricanes again, the Ducks, and the Buffalo Sabres as potential Pettersson trade destinations, and labels a few interesting packages as results for trades as well. I do like the idea of Marco Rossi in Vancouver. I actually do like Mason McTavish. I don't like Trevor Zegras. I don't think that would work. And I do think that there are some guys in Buffalo that would be interesting as well. But all in all, if you think about all the trade ideas that have been tossed out there, in my mind, the biggest name that comes to my want list, my wish list in an Elias Pettersson trade, at least out of the names that have been mentioned so far, I do think it's Adam Fantilli. I like him a lot, and if he ends up being a first overall caliber player at some point in his career, I don't think anybody would be surprised. But then again, Elias Pettersson had a 100-point season. Is that not already a first overall caliber guy? Maybe not necessarily in 2017, because Cale Makar went 4th overall in that year, but still. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the entire idea of Pettersson being linked to Columbus and whether or not Fantilli is a guy that you would be interested in. Fantilli or Johnson? I'm seeing a lot of people on Canucks Twitter referring to Fantilli as more so of a player that they want. However, that hometown factor of Kent Johnson certainly does not go away anytime soon. And you're seeing a lot of Canucks fans saying, yeah, no, I want Kent Johnson. Bring that Michigan scoring BC boy back onto the Vancouver Canucks. But ultimately, if it's Kent Johnson, maybe the return elsewhere needs to be jacked up a little bit more. Maybe Fantilli and Provorov doesn't work, but what if Johnson and Provorov works? That's got to be something you consider, no? So I will leave a link in the description to the Rick Dhaliwal video. Again, link is also going to be in the description to ExpressVPN, which is our primary sponsor for these videos. You can go out there and click the link in the description if you need any VPN services. But all in all, this Columbus thing is the one that I wanted to talk about the most. We can dive into some of the other trade ideas published by Ryan Dixon tomorrow and beyond, so be on the lookout for that. Do you think Marco Rossi is interesting enough to make a trade for? There are circumstantial things with the Minnesota Wild that I think make that kind of a trade difficult to do at this time. But for now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Elias Pettersson and Don Waddell, whether or not Columbus is a destination. If you're a Canucks fan or a Blue Jackets fan, what are your opinions about this entire thing? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.